MarTechTalk, the live webinar with no presentations, no PowerPoint, just talk.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever your time zone, welcome aboard. This is MarTechTalk, and I am your host, Kevin Crane. Welcome to the show. We are back from our summer hiatus and here today to talk about choosing the right marketing attribution model. Now, marketing attribution models are used in marketing to analyze and understand the various touch points and interactions a customer has with a brand or a product before making a purchase. This helps us determine which marketing channels or efforts are most effective in driving conversions and ultimately revenue. Now, just as in classic total quality management or continuous process improvement is centered around understanding the details of a business process, marketing attribution models really help us understand the marketing and selling process, the customer journey, if you will, and not in some sort of conceptual or hyperbolic way, in a real detailed way that can drive a more profitable and competitive marketing effort overall. Now, there are several types of marketing attribution models, and I certainly won't take time to cover them all here in detail, but it boils down to understanding customer interactions. What happens at that first touch attribution, the first interaction or touch point that a customer has with your brand? Many believe that this first touch plays the most significant role in conversion. Or is it the last touch attribution, that last interaction a customer has before making a purchase? Many feel that this last interaction is the most influential. Now, there are other models. Linear attribution, for example, gives equal importance to all interactions along the customer journey. But there are also models that assign more significance to the touch points that occur closer to conversion, or those that acknowledge that the first touch point might initiate interest and the last touch point might close the deal, but intermediate touch points contribute to nurturing and guiding the customer along the way. It can all get very complicated, which is why developments in machine learning and statistical models in AI are often used to create customized attribution models that are tailored to a business's proprietary or historical data or on a specific need. And these data-driven models may combine elements of all of the above approaches or introduce entirely new rules. Really, the sky is the limit, but it's really so important. Indeed, the choice of the right marketing attribution model is crucial for optimizing business and marketing performance, making informed decisions, maximizing the ROI of your efforts. It enables us to better understand the customer behaviors and allocate our resources efficiently and adapt to changes in the marketing landscape, ultimately leading to a more effective and successful campaign. So when it comes to your marketing analysis and strategic design, which marketing attribution models are most beneficial? What things should we look for in evaluating the use as well as the results of these attribution models? And what are some best practices we should consider when using marketing attribution as a foundational piece for our strategies? That's what we'll be discussing today with a great panel of guests. But before I bring them on board, I want to say that we want to hear from you too. We'd like to encourage everyone attending today to participate. So please join in with your comments in the chat section. And if you have a question along the way for our guests, please enter them into the chat feature. That's where I'll be looking, and I will attempt to get some of them into the flow of the show. And we'll have a few minutes also at the end for your questions. All right, with all of that said, let's bring aboard our great panel of guests today, starting with Manu Kalsi. Manu, are you with us? Welcome aboard, Manu. Welcome aboard.
Morning,
Manu is
Kevin.
former Vice President of Marketing at CNO Financial Group. Manu, where are you calling in from?
Chicago, Illinois.
Ah, very good. Welcome aboard. Thank you for being with us today. Joining us also is Ioana Irina, Director of Marketing Architecture, Automation, and Customer Relationship Management at Hewlett-Packard. Ioana, welcome aboard. Where are you calling in from?
Thank you. I live in Netherlands. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Nice. Very good. Well, welcome aboard. Thank you for spending your evening with us today. And finally, Rachelle Kubler-Weber, Vice President and Head of Marketing at Southern Veterinary Partners. Rachelle, welcome aboard. Where are you calling in from?
Good morning, Kevin. I am calling in from sunny Birmingham, Alabama.
Beautiful. All right. Well, welcome aboard, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, to get us started on this subject, I'd like to point our attention to an article published recently by Search Engine Land that talks about the removal of attribution models in Google Analytics GA4. Google removed first click, linear, time delay, and position-based attribution models. This leaves only last click and data-driven models available to users, and many marketers are upset about Google limiting us to only last click and data-driven models. Indeed, if your Google Ads account has conversions using these models, you can continue to use them until the end of September, the end of this month. But after that deadline, the models will be removed and data may indeed be lost. My question to the group is today, what do you feel is the impact to marketers with the removal of these models? I'd like to start with you, Manu, if I could. Manu, what is your opinion about this? What's the impact?
First of all, thank you, Kevin. Happy to be here. It's a pleasure and an honor to join this live talk show. So I have a couple of thoughts on this. So one, the reason Google removed those models sheds light on the light usage of those models, right? Google cited that less than 5 or 3% of the total users use these models. To me, that highlights a broader problem we have with attribution, marketing attribution out there. The understanding and the usage of these models which have been around. So yes, there are certain marketers who have been using it, are unhappy about it, but it sheds light on a broader trend out there that people tend to latch on to the most simple models like last touch. The other thing which I want to highlight here is Google is wanting to push everybody towards their data-driven attribution model, right? It's an algorithmic way for Google to give credit to everything that's in their network, right? From Google properties, from Gmail to YouTube to GDN, etc. So Google wants to move in that direction from a business perspective. There's a huge amount of inventory available with Google across all those properties. So long story short, I'd like to hear from my other folks as well. I think the impact should be minimal because the usage was minimal. But yes, it does remove some of the levers marketers would have had.
Iwana, Manu is absolutely correct. Google says that fewer than 3% of conversions in Google Ads are using these models. So is it really a big deal? Will marketers really miss these attribution models?
Well, I think from a business perspective, it didn't make sense, to maintain capabilities that are not being used, right? So probably Google was like, okay, it doesn't make sense for us to invest money in things that, our customers are not using. Now, I'm a person very interested in the data and in what our customers are doing. So for us, for example, it was interesting to see all these different attribution models that we could use, right? So I have mixed feelings. From one perspective, maybe it wasn't something that was absolutely critical for us, to continue our activities. But in the same time, I think it's important to have options and to understand the data about our customers. In the same time, I think, whenever we have this changes, not only from Google, but from other platforms as well, especially on the privacy as well, cookies disappearing and so on. I think very often we have this umbrella of, the company wants to protect the customers. So not giving too much data about what's happening in the journey and so on. And I disagree with that. I think it's actually helpful for the companies to understand what works better, because then we will create very customized customer journeys without, having too many ads being displayed to people that are not interested in our products, right? So I think this is actually the biggest risk, that we are missing important data about the people that are really interested in our products, and we cannot target the same way we've been doing it.
Now, Rochelle, I was surprised to see first click be removed, since, as Manu mentioned, I think most people gravitate towards first click as kind of, the model they tend to gravitate towards. Is this an impact to you folks at Southern Veterinary Partners? Do you use Google Ads, and what's your opinion about removal of first click and these other models?
Yeah, I follow, Kevin, thank you. I fall similar into Iwana's camp. at Southern Veterinary Partners, we're not as impacted, I'll be honest, as compared to maybe when I was at Dollar Shave Club or one of the prior groups that I worked with. I think our marketing here is a little simpler, and our last touch attribution is completely outside of the digital network. It's the conversion on the phone quite often, and then whether the client actually shows up in the door at one of our veterinary practices. But in the case of just them removing options, I fall strictly into Iwana's camp. I want all the data. Just because I'm not using something for the attribution in a conversion doesn't mean I'm not using it to make decisions and inform how I leverage different tools and techniques to grow my business. And I think, here at Southern Veterinary Partners, I'm not upset that they made the change. If I had been at Dollar Shave Club, I also would not have been upset, because we had a very sophisticated MarTech infrastructure outside of the Google platform. If I were dependent on Google, I would not be happy.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of marketers are not happy, but we shall see how it shakes out here after the end of September here. All right. Well, very good. Just a quick run by of this new article and the fact that GA4 is removing these attributions. If you're attending with us today, we'd like to hear from you too. What is your opinion about GA4 removing these models? All right. Well, let's get into the bulk of our discussion today, folks. And I'd like to start, if I could, with actually our discussion point number two. Discussion point number two, because I think it leads us to further on our discussion about which models are best. In other words, which attribution models deliver the best insights for your organization? Iwana, which models do you feel are most important for your work at HP?
We've been building a multi-touch attribution model for the last years, and this works. It's considering more formulas than just the simple attribution models that we are seeing. So, the first touch, last touch, or maybe linear or time decay and so on. So those are the classical options, right? The way we've been doing it is, it's, let's say, more a data-driven multi-touch attribution that is looking also at past experiences, but it's also having a weight on the time decay. So it's quite complex, and we actually have a data science team that is working on building this attribution model. What I would like to say is that it needs to be, whenever we are building an attribution model, we really need to look at the goal of this implementation, right? Like, what do you want to do with an attribution model? You might have, the first touch might be very useful for demand gen. The last touch might be focused only on conversions and so on. For us, it was important to understand the customer journeys. And then we started to be very sophisticated because we have a lot of products. So we need to understand different sales cycles, right? And try to build customer journeys, try to understand which channel is working best. But also this with the note that an attribution model is not necessarily the perfect view of the customer journey, right? You are still missing a lot of data that it's impossible even to capture. So if you're thinking of word of mouth, if you're thinking of the branding, right? So those are really difficult to capture in a multi-touch attribution model. And sometimes even the, say, economical situation, or, there are factors that are hard to capture for you to understand why, customer journey changed immediately and so on.
Okay.
So we have this sophisticated attribution model that we've built, but I would say it's just for us to help with understanding the customer journeys and to experiment, right? Because once you start to get some insights, you can actually experiment. And one of the things that we've been looking at quite a lot, and I see it as a mistake in many, not only attribution, but also in many insights in marketing, is to make sure that we separate correlation from causality, right? And that you can do it with a lot of experimentation to understand if it's a cause effect or it's just a correlation of two factors.
Okay. Manu, from your experience, which models do you feel work best, and which would you recommend to our listeners who are looking to up their game when it comes to attribution models?
I mean, every marketer wants to get to a multi-touch attribution sometime in their lifetime, right? So, I'll tell you my experience, Kevin. When at CNO Financial Group, we were last touch. We were extremely performance-driven organization, very heavily focused on conversion, and we've made foray into creating a multi-touch attribution model many times. But then, it's a Herculean effort. It requires a lot of time and money investment in terms of gathering the data, a lot of focus on building it out, testing it out, and continuing the experimentation. We latched on to Last Touch, right or wrong, for a period of time. But when I was at Stir prior to that, leading marketing, we had implemented a time decay model. Very simple, I would say, baby steps towards an MTA. We were a B2B organization that sold products that had a very, very long sales cycle. And if you touched a person, the next touch could be like, weeks and months away, and it could almost take up to a year for somebody to convert. So it just made sense for us to use some sort of time delay based attribution. And that worked well for us in B2B. Mm-hmm. So again, there's no one size fits all, but I would suggest if you're in a B2B considering something like that, especially if you have a very, very long sales cycle, tends to get you closer to not reality, but at least a more practical way of attributing. But I've been in the last touch mode for a while now.
You make a great point. It really depends on the nature of your business and sort of the swing of that cycle, if it's shorter, if it's longer. Rochelle, from your point of view, which models do you feel work best, and what would you recommend to our listeners that are looking to up their game with attribution models?
Yeah, I think great question, Kevin. And I'm going to piggyback a little bit on what Manu was saying. It very much is dependent on your business, on what capabilities you have within your company, your MarTech infrastructure, frankly. Again, I'm going to contrast Dollar Shave Club, which was e-commerce direct to consumer, versus Southern Veterinary Partners, which is 400 veterinary practices across the U.S., right? Very, very different businesses.
Right, yes.
The sales cycle for a veterinary practice is less than 30 days. From the time a client makes a search, what we're finding is there is a 1 week window where they're looking for a practice and they convert and they want the appointment. They want to be in our practices within 5 business days. Because of that, for us, we go simple. I'm not going to put the overhead of a complex MarTech infrastructure on top of our practices. I'm not going to create those overhead costs. So for us, data-driven on Google works great. And it's because we've got a very sophisticated data infrastructure and one of the best teams in the industry supporting our marketing team. And with that, we have visibility into whether or not we've got a direct conversion. So we've got direct match back in our practices, whether or not that client showed. So the back half of the journey, those touches are all offline. So for us, we're not dependent on Google's attribution model, frankly, because we've got so much that happens offline. Mm-hmm. At Dollar Shave Club, we had multi-device, multi-touch. We knew first and last touch were weighted more heavily. The touches in the middle, we down weighted. And again, we handled that internally. But that comes with a significant cost from a MarTech standpoint. So you have to look at what's going on with your business and what you have to support and what costs your business could tolerate.
Well, this is an interesting and important discussion, because choosing the right attribution model can give you, it's really important because it can give you a competitive edge, help you make better decisions, optimize your campaigns, make sure you're not misallocating your resources. It really just gets down to really having more data, more knowledge about the process to really help you drill into a more effective campaign. But Rochelle, as you mentioned, there are times when touch points are not something you can easily observe. So my next question, or our next discussion point, leads us to our next discussion point. What are some alternative attribution approaches when these customer touch points and conversions can't be easily observed? Rochelle, I'd like to stick with you because that sounds like you're doing quite a bit of that. Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so right now we have a call tracking platform. We evaluate, and it's AI driven. We evaluate whether or not we converted via phone. That signal gets piped back to Google, so that's still part of our digital infrastructure.
Okay.
However, that's when everything goes offline, right? So for us, we bring all of our practice management, all of our point of sale data back in-house. And then we evaluate from the clients that booked, whether it's by phone or online, did they show up in the practice? And so we know we don't ship that data back to Google, but we leverage that in conjunction with the information we get from our digital systems to determine what our strategy and our target strategy is going to be.
All right, very good. Interesting. All right. Ioana, what is your thought on attribution that can't be observed? And what do you folks do at HP?
Well, I was thinking, so I don't think just one model of attribution is actually the answer. You might have an attribution, for the ad tech, one for the MarTech.
Right.
Eventually, happily, you connect the MarTech also with what the sales is doing, so that you can have also, the end of the closure and understanding what happened on the sales side. There are still some gaps even in our attribution models. For example, it's really difficult to understand what happens once a lead is created because we don't track really every activity of a sales rep. How many calls it gave to that account, especially in the B2B side, right? How many calls were what that person said, or we are missing this. But we are trying to understand by doing different research focus groups, right? Talking to the people to understand what are we missing and how we can put it more into the content, right? Then I would say, again, any attribution model is gonna miss some data. The ideal is that you try to get as much data as possible, but it's not always a situation of I need all the data. Too much data might be too much and you cannot absorb it. Or what happens is that data becomes too expensive for the results that you need in your attribution model. So I would say all these insights that you have. So if you have different attribution models or even reporting frameworks, because for example, for branding, you're not going to have an attribution model. You're going to have an insights framework, let's say, that you're measuring. Putting them together and trying to get a sense of the customer journey, that's the most important. And I think even on the side of the data that is missing, I think we need to recognize there is some beauty in the fact that we don't know everything about our customers, because it keeps us challenged, right? If, we would have the exact answer, I think it would be also quite a boring world.
Everybody would do it, right?
Yes, exactly.
It was easy. All right, interesting that you're talking about sometimes too much data. To me, I want all of it. I want to run every model there is. I want to know every possible piece of data I can possibly get. But you're you want to sort of saying that can be too much. Now, Manu, why wouldn't I just run every model I can possibly do and just collect every bit of data that I could possibly get?
Well, I don't know what kind of budget you're going to have for that, Kevin. But just going back I want to piggyback on what Ioana just brought up in terms of it's never going to be perfect, right? Let's make it,
Okay.
Every white paper you read there, yes, you can talk about attribution all day long, but it's never going to be 100% because the world we live in is not linear, right? And not every channel is digital. For example, I will tell you at CNA Financial Group, a good chunk of our business came from non-digital channels, from TV, audio, direct mail, and other efforts that we did in the field with our agents. Okay. And if anybody's ever worked with sales agents who are in the field, trying to get accurate dispositions and data from them in a timely fashion is a challenge. right? And if the attribution model depends heavily upon, hey, can you tell us if you touch the customer and fill in all this information in your CRM, you're going to be disappointed. So yes, it's all about starting in one place, picking an attribution model, taking the data that you have, and to Iona's point, there's a lot of branding efforts which marketers always tend to forget, right? Especially performance marketers these days who are so fixated on clickstream data do not really value, or in a broader sense, the organization doesn't value a lot of things you do around branding. You do branding in the community, you do content marketing, you do events. All those collectively have a huge impact on the outcome, right? On the conversion. It's not just the Google clicks and all the other things that you're doing. So long story short, it's a matter of bringing all that together and using your data science experts and your partners to kind of make sense out of it and see what's really driving the needle, right? So to answer your question about why wouldn't you bring all the data together? I mean, it's hard. It's a Herculean effort. And even if you had the money and the budget to go after it, it's not going to be perfect, right? This is where I know we're talking multi-channel attribution, but I would like to bring up other alternatives. There's media mix modeling, right? It takes a very different view, a top-down view, and it's something that I would think that if you were living in a world which was heavily analog, so if your marketing mix was heavy TV, offline channels, etc., maybe media mix modeling, also known as econometric modeling, may be a way to go. So I don't know if you want to go in that direction, Kevin. I want to definitely not spoil your chain of thought there.
Well, you make a good point, Manu. It's never going to be perfect, and there are more approaches than what we're talking about today. We are here today on MarTechTalk. I'm Kevin Crane. I'm joined by Manu Kalsi, Ioana Irina, and Rochelle Kubler-Weber. We're talking about marketing attribution models, finding the right ones, finding out the right process for you. Now, Manu, you mentioned when I was suggesting that maybe we want to just do it all, where's the money going to come from? And so that really leads us to our third discussion point today, and that is strategies to deploy when justifying your approach internally. Now, we all need to sell our campaigns or our efforts and up the line. We need to get approval for the money that we'll spend and the effort that we'll take. So my question is, what is your advice for our listeners today who may be struggling to justify their approach and sell their approach internally? What are some techniques that we can use that will help us with that? Rochelle, what techniques do you suggest?
Great question. For us, there are a few things that we do. One is very much a heavy test and learn approach. Before we deploy something globally, if we have a data-driven idea, we will go test it in a sample set of our hospitals. We'll be able to leverage that as kind of a scientific basis. We've got a group that hasn't been touched that's a similar cohort. We can compare performance. That allows us to contrast between the two. And as we're communicating to leadership, we're painting the picture of, okay, this is what we're seeing. This is the hard data. We never talk in marketing here about fluff. It's always in terms of revenue generated, EBITDA generated. How are we moving the needle? What clients are we acquiring? How are we driving retention, retained revenue? So we always use that language. ROI is always calculated on impact to EBITDA and contribution profit. So I speak the language that my CEO and CFO can understand. If I'm talking about we need to make an investment, I better have a data-based, test and learn driven forecast of what I want to do, how it's going to move the needle for the business. And as we're piloting it, we gather that data. We take it to the group and we present it, especially if it's something that we haven't budgeted for, but we need to respond to whatever's going on in the industry. And we present our case. Hey, I think that if we do this, it's going to generate another 1.5% of top line revenue for the company. At that point, it's a pretty compelling story, and we usually get buy-in. It's not a difficult process here. It would be if we didn't speak that language.
Speak the language of your supporters and sponsors. It's a great piece of advice that works for in every situation, really. We're having a fantastic discussion about marketing attribution models. If you have a question for our panelists today, please do feel free to enter them into the chat feature. We will attempt to get them into the flow of the show, and we'll have a few minutes here at the end of our program for your questions. I own
Can I also jump in?
Please go ahead, Manu. Yes.
Build on what just Rochelle mentioned.
Please.
So yes, adapt the language, speak the language of a CEO and board, and sort of sing from the same song of book of metrics. My suggestion also would be simple, right? Start simple. If you're starting from zero, pick a simple model. First touch, last touch, whatever, right? Focus on making that clean, get reliable data, build that muscle of calculating attribution, creating a dashboard, the rigor in the team, sitting down along with their sales partners, their business partners, looking at metrics and having a discussion on a regular basis. That's really key, right? Now, from there, if you have all the blessings and you have the budget, etc., then venture into expanding into some sort of multi-touch attribution or more fancier model, but start with something simple, get some data, get everybody in the habit, right, and build that muscle and take it from there. Do not venture out into a 1 year long attribution building project. That's not going to go well.
So speak the language, start simple, build from there. Ioana, what are some tactics that you have used at HP? HP is a huge organization worldwide, of course. So you must go through quite a process in your justification. What are some techniques that you have used that you feel have been particularly successful for you?
Before I do that, so just wanted to go back a little bit in time, because that's how we started actually to build attribution models. If you remember, and probably there are companies that are still measuring their marketing efforts in this way, with marketing influenced opportunities and marketing generated opportunities. Now, to understand the ROI of the marketing campaigns, you would look at if you influenced the deals or if you generated them. So for HP, it started exactly from this conversation. How much is marketing in the commercial space? How much is marketing contributing, to closing a deal, and how much is sales contributing to closing the deal? And because we had all these conversations, we started to build attribution models. And I totally agree with Manu. We started small, and then we started to make it big. My tactic with all these big ideas, and I've been implementing for the last 5 years the entire MarTech stack, was always related to the law of diffusion. I think you can have a very good conversation with the CMO to explain, what you want to do. But in order to make your efforts trustworthy, you need to do something small that is capturing attention. So I believe in the law of diffusion, which means that I need the 20% of the early adopters of my ideas. So I've always started with a country or a market where I will start to build a small capability that is offering some insights. Maybe I develop it even more, and I get the buy-in from the campaign managers that really needed those insights, right? And I made the first model as simple as it was, in a way that was good for them, good enough for them, so that I can then present it to the leadership together, right? And once you get that traction, you get that visibility and that trust, I think it's easier to go and scale, worldwide.
All right, very good. All right. If we have questions for our panelists, now would be the time to enter them into the chat feature. I'd be happy to get some questions from our audience, from our attendees today for our expert panel of guests. And this one coming in from Daniela West. Thank you, Daniela, for your question today. How do you deal with an inability to observe the whole customer journey due to cross-browser journeys? Interesting. That is an interesting question. Does anyone have a response for Daniela on this question about how do you observe the whole customer journey across cross-browser journeys? Manu, Ioana, Rochelle, any thoughts there?
I think technology can help to some extent.
Yeah.
And really, in what way?
Yes. I think if you have a CDP, so having a data warehouse, so a place where you put all this data and try to find some mechanisms to create linkages between browsers, I think you can solve some of these problems. For example,
Okay.
connect the cookies from different browsers to the email, or you still have some gaps, but you can solve some of these linkages, right? Try to create connections with email address, with ad tech, with some other, let's say, unique identifiers to the cookies so that you can understand the entire journey.
Yeah, at Dollar Shave Club, that was one thing that we did. I mean, basically, we paid, like I said, a significant amount investment into our marketing infrastructure that allowed us to do not only cross-browser but cross-device. With that, the partner that we worked through to obtain their technology, they solved the stitching together behind the scenes. In that case, for that business, it made sense. It absolutely would not make sense in the business I'm in today. So it very much depends on what stage your company is in, what your business model is, what your revenue model is.
I'm interested in the potential impact of AI in all of this. Is there a role for AI in helping coordinate all of this, collection of the data, understanding of the data? Any thoughts on where AI comes to play in the next few years with all of this?
Kevin, maybe I can start and then others can jump in. I think there's definitely a case for AI in every stage of this process, but I'm thinking more on the latest stage, right? So if a marketing attribution model, whatever model you pick, gives you the baseline insights and has taken into account the different sort of parameters that actually drive those attributions, predictive AI can be used to optimize it and come up with different use cases for experiments. For example, right now, I'll tell you, my teams, we come up with different tests and experiments. Let's try this, let's try that. How about if we do this A/B testing? What if we can use predictive AI to actually come up with those different scenarios, optimize them, test them out, and give you the results, which can just speed up the decision-making process? That's one use case or one application of AI that I can think about, and it's something that we had been working on at CNO Financial Group.
That's important. That's an important point. There may be times when you need to move quickly, right? We don't have weeks or months to move. We need to move now.
Yeah. We call it the next best
your
action, right? We call it the next best action. So what should be the next best action when a customer is, going through the journey, which can expedite the decision making for the customer or make them actually take an action that you want them to take. So apologies, I spoke over you.
HP's high-tech company. Are you folks using AI in any way?
Yes, not necessarily at this point on the reporting side and attribution, but we are also experimenting a lot of use cases. Very interested in the value that it can produce. I was thinking right now, and additional to what Manu said, I fully agree with you. It can speed up processes big time when applied correctly. I think AI also gives us much more insights than what we had. And I think it has the capability to fully replace what we've all wanted in the last years, which is predictability, right? We've been collecting a lot of data to get this prediction on the next best action. Well, I think AI, with all the data it has, it can tell us exactly, okay, do this, right? That would work. You merge your internal data, and then with the external machine learning that you have of data, I think it can merge to something much more powerful than we had until now, right, on the reporting. I think another part of AI related to insights is the ability to create KPIs on demand. I think all companies are struggling with reporting frameworks, with the insights, how to interpret them, how to translate them for the business, how to measure, how to connect the KPIs to the ROI, and really make sense about the customer journey. And when I'm saying KPIs, I'm not referring only to the, conversion, like the traditional ones. I think we're missing to understand, for example, velocity, which is, in my perspective, a very important KPI. So lead velocity, and how much effort do you need to do until a lead becomes an opportunity, right?
Hmm.
And it can help you in decision making when you are working with different platforms, especially on content syndication, for example, right? So I think that is another use case, and probably, AI, if trained correctly, it can build some attribution models in a few months instead of, years. It could happen to us. Yeah.
Rochelle, before we have to move on, your thoughts on the role of AI in marketing attribution here today and in the near future?
Well, if you're using Google's data-driven attribution model, you're already using it, right? You're already there on some
Right.
level. So we're all bound to it. I think there's one piece you have to look at what your organization needs, and what your industry calls for, whether or not you're a B2B or direct to consumer. We're using it for content generation and within my marketing team to speed up some of our processes. It's not outside of the providers and vendors that have it already integrated. For us, it's not something that we're digging heavily into. I'm sure we will at some point. I think the one thing I've found is as we use it, depending on the tool we use, you've also got to look at the recency of the database that it's been trained on. I've found there are a few tools that I've looked at where the data that it's operating from is 6 months to 12 months stale. And at that point, as a marketer, you also have to look at, is it going to give you what you need for what you're asking it?
Mm-hmm. All right, this is MarTech Talk. We have been talking about choosing the right marketing attribution model. We've been with Manu Kalsi, former Vice President of Marketing at CNO Financial Group, Ioana Irina, Director of Marketing and Architecture, Automation and Customer Relationship Management at HP, and Rochelle Kubler-Weber, Vice President and Head of Marketing at Southern Veterinary Partners. All right, everyone, we have reached the action item round of the program. I'm wondering if each of you could provide us each with just one quick action item our attendees can use to take advantage of the ideas and advice today. In our remaining time, Manu, what is your action item for us today?
As I said earlier, Kevin, start simple, start small, and experiment. Marketing is all about experimentation. So experiment your way to the next level of attribution.
Nice. Thank you, Manu. Ioana, what is your action item for our attendees today?
I think the best attribution model is the one that is aligned with your goals. So always look at what you need to deliver, and then you can build your attribution model. Even if it's a small one or a more complex one, always start with the business goal in mind.
Thank you, Ioana. And Rochelle, please, one good quick action item for us that we can use to take advantage of the ideas and advice today.
I'd bridge between both Manu and Ioana. Fail fast, fix fast. And make sure you're looking at what your business actually needs and not all the bright and shiny things that are out there that might distract you from getting to the meat of how you're going to provide value.
Well, all right. It's been a fascinating discussion. Manu, Ioana, Rochelle, thank you so much for being with me today. I really appreciate your time. It has been a great session. Your ideas and advice were spot on. Thank you so much. I hope that we'll get a chance to talk again soon. And to everyone joining us today, thank you too. And join us next time on October 3rd at 1600 British time when we will talk with another great panel of experts. Next time about the risks and rewards of deploying AI in marketing communications. Well, that should be another great discussion. Meanwhile, if you'd like to find me, you can do so on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect there. Check me out. I'm Kevin Crane. And you can check out my weekly audio podcast, Everyday MBA. All right, so that'll do it for this episode of MarTech Talk. Until next time, I'm Kevin Crane. Thank you so much for watching.